I make the staple out of an appropriately sized forged collar. The British style of forging a collar is to have the two ends touch in the middle of one side. You don't need to be that pedantic with this particular case. We're going to cut this either across the sides or across the middle here until we get our staple material. There are a number of formulas to determine the length of the collaring stock required to make a collar. They all vary depending on what you're going to do to the collar prior to fitting it. I forge mine lightly in this case. I don't want super sharp corners, and so I typically, for this application, I'll take the perimeter of the stock to be collared. So I've got 7/8 times 4 is going to give me 3.5, plus the thickness of the collaring material, 3/16. So my length is 3 11/16. When you're making the mandrel for the collaring stock, there are two things that are important to me. First, it has chamfered corners to prevent cracks in the collar as you're forging it, and secondly, it has a taper to the leading end, and that taper needs to be as long as your collaring stock is wide, so that if you're forging your collar, you can just pop that on the anvil, give the collar a knock, and you've got clearance and it should just slide off. Or if you forge this and it's not quite complete and you have to take a second heat, this can come out of the forge now being hot, and you'll be able to place your mandrel very quickly into the center of that, give it a tap, and be able to go to work. When I'm doing the collar, the first thing I'm going to do is cut the end off the bar. Then I'm going to measure back 3 11/16 from the top of the original cut, and I make a mark with the chisel. Don't go too deep. Bend this into a horseshoe shape. Make a slight cut, not severing it from the bar, and take another heat. Once this is up to heat, bring it out, wring this off with a pair of tongs, and then put it around your mandrel. Let's have a look at that. Once you've cut your collar in half to the right depth, the next thing we're going to do is cut out the corners. So I've scribed my line on the back here, come down with a hacksaw, and I must be as wide as, or a little wider than, the tool that punches the hole in the back plate. Come down to my mark, then I'm going to cut out those corners. Once I've got the corners cut out, the rest is then file work. I'll match up those two corners, put a safe edge file across it, and file my tenon. It's important to me that the shoulder is on the outside of the staple, that way it's going to hide the mortise hole. My file has a save edge. I typically buy just a normal file and then run that along a belt sander and take the edge off. So from that to that. That gives me the ability to hold it on something that I don't want to file and file the other surface. With my save edge pointing towards the shoulder, I'm going to lift it up and start to make a cut at the back. I'm going to drop my hand, not something I typically like to do with a file. Now I'm going to try and join those together. Once I've got the shoulder established, I can just file again with my save edge against the shoulder. Once I've got both tenons cut, I'm going to choose a tenon and take that down to about its stock dimensions that I require, leaving the other one long for my fit. I find that an old piece of small diameter fire hose does well to protect my files when I'm not using them. For the latch bar, I like to have a nice round circle there. Drill that with whatever size rivet you're going to use, and then on the back side, certainly for this last little bit, I put a little chamfer in there, and that helps this when it hits the keep to rise up and go over the keep rather than hitting a sharp edge. Once you've got your latch bar filed, put it up to the backing plate, and now we're just going to draw there and put a slight line across there, and now we've got a place that we can drill a hole and look to our tenon. The tenon to the staple is going to be fit on the outside of that line, so I take my Sharpie and just scribe a line around the tenon. When I first started to punch the holes for the mortise for the backplate, I started with a sacrificial piece of 16 gauge sheet steel, and my punch was flat-ended, rather like a slot punch. I had reasonable results with that, but when I went to the backing plate, I ended up tearing the backing plate a lot, frequently. So now I have a punch that has got a concavity to the end, so it shears as well as punches. Here is my marking out for the first mortise. So I'm just going to put my punch on that. I'm going to hold it at a slight angle, so I'm just digging in with one corner and I'm hitting it, so you can see I've got a slight mark there. I'm going to carry on with that, and then I'm going to move it across to the other corner. So now you can see I've got two corners going. At this stage I'm just going to flatten the material on the anvil. And hopefully you should start to see some material being bulged out at the back. Just carrying on the same manner. When I feel the corners go, then I go straight up and down, and you can see this is starting to shear out at the back. We'll work from the back just to clean out the slug. And there we go. For my needle files, typically I go with a Stanley Tools product, and of these 6 files I'll use these 2 at the end. One has got its parallel with a taper to the end, and the other one is parallel in both directions. I'll use my tapered file first. And my parallel file. In this case I've done a little filing. I offer up my tenon, which doesn't quite fit yet, but you can see that the staple is at a slight angle. It needs to be twisted more to the clockwise. So I'm going to remove some of this lower corner here and see if I can get this to fit. Here's our mortise with that corner removed. Just going to offer up the staple. That seems to be a reasonable fit. If we have a look at the back, that looks good. Now I'm going to take my marker and mark the other tenon. This is the back side of my backing plate when I've got both mortises filed, and if I just offer up my staple, I've got a reasonable fit. To make the mortise for the latch bar lever is nothing more than accumulative math. You're going to take your latch bar lever and subtract out the bit that goes through the handle of the mortise. Then add to that the thickness of the door, and you're left with the cross section of the material that has to stick through from the other side without interfering with the latch bar. That's the minimum you have beneath. Then you need the latch bar to actually lift and clear the keep that is keeping the latch bar here. That gives you the top dimension. Unfortunately, I found no better way of dealing with this than punching either end with a round punch, creating 2 round holes, and then using a jeweler's saw to cut out the middle bit. I used a French pattern hammer during the making of this video. It's made by John Williams of Guildworks. And if you like this style of forging, go to my website markaspery.com. I have 3 books available that will help you on your journey to becoming a blacksmith.